at 1 o'clock. I'll go through the roll call. I'm Sean Holland. I'm present, obviously. Mr. Downey, and again, I'll provide an opportunity for you to introduce yourself to us if you'd like.
At this point.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, great. Yeah. Thanks. Thank you, Sean. Yeah, I'm Graham Downey. I'm the mayor's special assistant on housing and transportation. This is my second week, so getting up to speed and especially excited to be here. The mayor asked me to be here because we are taking this really seriously. This is the top priority for us. We think, AMATS is really important. Transportation is how we build our city. It's how we experience our city. It's how we create our future together. And I think especially on that point, on the future point, I think something I'm really interested in personally, and we're interested in, is fiscal responsibility. I think thinking about, especially about long-term maintenance and how we're taking care of what we're building feels especially important. I think another administration priority is safe streets and trails, which includes unsheltered homelessness and also traffic calming and making sure that our streets are open to everyone. So my background a little bit is went to law school, but managed to never practice. And so I've always been a policy guy. And funnily enough, my dad, at the end of his career, was a bureaucrat with the Federal Transit Administration, helping to build their grant management system. So at 16-year-old, I couldn't have cared less about federal transportation grants, and now here we are. So it's nice to come full circle, and really excited to be here with you all. Thanks, Sean.
Thanks for that. Yeah, well, Mr. Olds is online.
Yep, it's Jason Olds, DEC Air Quality.
Dr. Bolin, here. Happy to be here. And Mr. Littlefield, I didn't give you the same opportunity last month. Apologies for that, but I'll give you the same opportunity now if you'd like it.
Yeah, real quick. Been Alaskan since 1982. The Air Force brought me up here as a heavy equipment operator. I've been involved in roads my entire life, either road maintenance, road supervision, road construction. My last 28 years was with the municipality of Anchorage in street maintenance, and my last 13 was the superintendent of road maintenance out in Eagle River. So, I'm pretty much involved in it and lived it, and so I'm in love with it. So anyway, that's me.
Yeah, great. Thanks, and welcome to you both, and you'll be great additions to the policy committee. We have a forum. We have all 5 of us here. Aaron, can you help us out with the public involvement announcement, please?
So we have AMATS committee meetings are open to the public, and the public is provided an opportunity to comment at each meeting. Business items are first presented by a staff or consultant, after which the committee is given the opportunity to discuss the business item. Once that's done, the public is invited to formally comment. Each participant will have 3 minutes to speak on their topic. A couple of housekeeping items. If you're joining us virtually and you're not a member of the committee, please turn your camera off when you're not speaking on an item. If you're joining us by phone, to mute phone, press *6. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. Do we have approval of the agenda?
So moved.
Moved by Dr. Bolin. Do I hear a second? Seconded by Mr. Littlefield. Do we have any changes? I'd like to suggest one change. Item number 5 is a letter that addresses some STIP comments. Item number 6 is an update on STIP amendment number 1. I propose that we switch those, have the update first, just in case that makes any changes to the letter, but I'd probably ask somebody else to move that. Yeah.
Well, I can try.
Okay.
I'd like to move agenda item 6 to before agenda item 5.
That works. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Olds. Thank you. Anybody opposed to making that change? Okay, we'll make that change. The agenda is approved as amended. For item number 4, we have before us the minutes from June 20th, 24 for approval. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes? Moved by Dr. Bolin. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Littlefield. Any changes or discussion on the minutes? Hearing none, are there any objections to approving the minutes with recommended changes? Hearing none, the June 20th, 2024 minutes are approved. So we will skip down to item number 6 for STIP amendment number 1 update. And Aaron, is Ben going to take that?
Yeah. We'll have somebody from DOT give a quick update.
Whenever you're ready, Ben.
For the record, Ben White. I'm the planning lead for the Anchorage Field Office. And just wanted to provide an update to you all on the draft STIP amendment that has been put out for public comment. It went live July 3rd. We had some issues with the website, but it was about 18, 20 hours of the website being down. And since we've decided to extend the public comment period to August 5th. So for those that may not be aware, there's on the website, there's a portal link that you can get in and provide comments as a member of the public. But we wanted to just provide AMATS with an update on the fact that the STIP amendment is out for draft for public comment. And we have received comments from all three MPOs in draft form. This week has been an MPO policy week. We've already had MVP on Tuesday. Fast planning was yesterday. And so we're passing along the fact that we have seen the draft comments. We appreciate the feedback. And we encourage folks to get in and take a look at the STIP amendment and provide input and feedback. Again, the comment deadline is August 5th. And so I can answer some questions. There's not an action item, just a.
Yeah, are there any questions from the committee? Mr. White. Not seeing any. Ben, are there any questions from the public? Not seeing any hands raised. Thanks. So we're on to action item 5, which is the AMATS letter regarding the 24 to 27 STIP amendment number 1 comments. And so you have a presentation for that.
I'll do a review on this as we'll go. So if you could go to the number, just scroll down to the number 1. So I'm going to go through them one by one, give a quick explanation of them, and then also try and give a good rationale as why it matters for AMATS. So hopefully you can kind of see the connection of why the comments are coming forward.
Maybe before you start, did the
Yeah.
technical committee review this?
I know that was one of the
Okay.
things I was going to mention.
Okay, all right, great, sorry.
So the amendment 1 was released on July 3rd, kind of later in the day. I got noticed on July 4th at 9 a.m. or so, 9:50 a.m. And I went into the office to start working on these edits before I left for the long holiday weekend. So staff had maybe about 3.5, 4 days to review the STIP and provide comments before you today. So there was not enough time to have these reviewed by the Technical Advisory Committee before coming to you. It has been a challenge for staff to get the TAC or PC to regularly attend any special meetings that we have. It's hard to find times where everybody can attend, where enough people can attend. And it is a lot of work for staff to put that together, especially with only 2 of us in the office now. Unfortunately, the TAC did not have a chance to weigh in on these. There's still the opportunity for them to weigh in at a later date if they have any comments or questions, but staff wanted to get these before the PC in enough time to submit them for the deadline for the STIP. So it is a little unusual, but it's kind of what we got. Okay, so first one is the adopted by reference section. In the STIP itself, there is a section for adopted by reference, and this is where the TIP is housed, or the TIPs for the MPOs. There's also the 2040 MTP included, and staff is recommending that it be removed. DOT does not adopt the MTP. The MTP, for anyone who knows or doesn't know, MTP is Metropolitan Transportation Plan. It is AMATS's long-range transportation plan that helps to guide projects for the next 20+ years. DOT participates in the approval process by having representation on the TAC and the PC. And also the MTP and the STIP are 2 vastly different documents, although they are related to each other. The STIP does not adopt the MTP. The STIP adopts the TIP. So staff is recommending the MTP be removed from this document. If there is a desire to reference the MTP in the STIP, which is fine, because it makes sense to talk about long-range transportation plans that are out there, that should be done via text where it talks about what the MTP is and how it relates to the STIP itself. And it should also reference the most recent version, which is the 2050 MTP, not the 2040. It's important for this for AMATS because It's just trying to make sure there's clear delineation about who approves what, ultimately. The long-range plan is approved by the policy committee itself, period. Then FHWA and FTA approves any air quality determination that's required for it. The TIP is approved by the policy committee, then approved by the governor by including it into the STIP. So it's nice to have those clear delineations of what is approved by who. Okay, next item. And I'm sorry if I sound a little exasperated. It seems like I'm repeating myself multiple meetings on some of these items, so. Number 2, AMAT's Metro and 5303 planning funds are shown in the STIP without being in the TIP and should be removed. The Metro and 5303 planning funds, those are the ones that pay for staff time for both AMATs and then some of the municipal staff like transit and others who help assist AMATs. These planning funds are not required to be in the STIP. They can be if there is a desire to, but they're not required to be in there. They are shown in the AMAT's Unified Planning Work Program, or UPWP. They're also shown the state's version of the AWP, Annual Work Program. The only requirement from the feds is that these funds have to be included in a work program, so you know what you're going to be spending it on over the time period. At the last quarterly meeting with MPO staff and DOT, it was agreed upon by everybody there that the PL funds should not be shown in the STIP and only shown in the work program, because that's where fiscal constraint happens. The work program is decided upon and approved by the policy board or policy committees. And so again, it's just making sure there's clear delineation and understanding. Why this matters for AMATs is if the PL funds are shown in the STIP, then you're bound to STIP amendment process or STIP development timeframes. And those have been taking a little while to get through and approved. And PL funds are not something you can backdate if you miss the approval deadline. So if there's a gap between when our current UPWP ends and the new one needs to begin, the STIP's not done, so the funding's not available. There's a gap of how is staff time going to be paid. We've recently experienced this gap, and we were not able to backdate it to get federal funding to cover that. So the municipality of Anchorage covered that funding, and there was some funding available, and we greatly appreciate their assistance. It's concerning that that could happen in the future if these funds are still kept in the STIP. So the recommendation is not to, and again, fiscal constraint is handled as part of the UPWP. Number 3, so there are projects in the STIP within the MPO boundary that are not included in the TIP. So very similar to the Tier 1 corrective action that was provided to DOT on the original STIP. Projects, there should not be projects in the STIP without them being in the TIP first. So projects get added to the TIP first, then the TIP gets added to the STIP, and projects are included in the STIP via the TIP. FHWA also mentioned that there should not be individually called out projects within an MPO boundary in the STIP. So if there is a project that DOT wants to fund with their NHPP funding, it's in the TIP, but it doesn't get shown in the STIP. I know it's confusing, sorry, but that's what they say. Because part of it is you work with everybody to coordinate getting these projects into the TIP so the MPO supports it. And then once the TIP is incorporated in the STIP, you don't need a separate project in the STIP because there's often delays between when the MPOs update their TIPs and then what the STIP says. And there was causing concerns in previous STIP that you had the same project shown twice with different amounts. And they're like, which one do we approve on our end? So just wanted to call out that there are these projects. I did want to note that almost all of these projects are shown as illustrative in the TIP because they used to be in the TIP, but then they were removed as part of Amendment 2 because the funding was not available. So fiscal constraint. There was robust discussion at the time to get that information, but it was not provided. So this information is provided in the STIP. So we'll have to figure out what to do with these projects.
Can I stop you for a couple
Yeah.
questions? Maybe I'll think out loud just a little bit, but so I think that it's a really confusing process for me. But so the STIP, for those projects to be in the TIP, the STIP has to identify funding that will be available for the projects that are in the TIP,
Mhm.
that will be in the TIP.
Mhm.
So, right, so So if they aren't shown in the, at least the draft step, so I guess maybe start from the scratch, or start from the beginning there that, so properly, maybe the STIP should show just a line item for these EMATS projects. And then the TIP will come in behind those and add those projects back in.
So I think the cleanest way to do it, in my opinion, is DOT provides to AMATs a record via email or letter or something that says, here's the funding that DOT would like to put towards these projects, and then list out the project names, descriptions, and the funding amount and how the fiscal constraint works, or the funding years. Then AMATs can do a TIP amendment. If approved by the committees, that amendment then goes to the STIP, which has to be amended. And during that time, they can add that ledger item to it to say, okay, here's how much NHPP is going to projects within the AMATs area. And so they match up. Because then you'd be like, okay, here's the data that DOT provided to AMATs. Great, they put everything into the TIP amendment, say in an ideal world. Now, when we incorporate that into the STIP, while we're doing an amendment, we'll add the ledger in that says, here's how much is provided, everything matches up. Then FHWA can see coordination happens between the different groups. And when they do their final approval of the STIP, everybody is in alignment. That would probably be the easiest way to go. Because part of the thing you have to remember about projects in the STIP, some of these projects are within limited maintenance areas and require air quality conformity. The STIP doesn't do air quality conformity. They rely on the MPOs and their TIP process to do air quality conformity. So if you have projects added to the STIP that aren't in the TIP, you're not meeting your air quality conformity requirements. And so it has some problems there. Even with the fact that we have a change to our limited maintenance, there are some Eagle River projects that would fall within that air quality conformity requirements. So that's why it should really be in the TIP first, to make sure that you've done the fiscal constraint and air quality before it gets added to the STIP.
I think I understand.
I do understand it is complicated, so I apologize for that.
And if I was gonna think out loud, if the intent is for the state to fund these projects to be included in the TIP later on, trying to think of when the public would realize that that's the intent of the STIP. And if these projects are in the draft, does that accomplish that, or then I don't know, they pulled up the final amendment?
It's really done as part of the TIP amendment itself. That's where the public involvement is really critical, because that's where we individually show the projects with the funding amounts. That's where we show how there's fiscal constraint. That's how we show that they meet the air quality conformity requirements. And then when it goes to the TIP or STIP to be incorporated in, and there's an amendment process that has public involvement, people can see that the projects are in the TIP, which is now going to be incorporated into the STIP, so they can see how that is all going to be working together.
And do we have a TIP amendment in process?
No, we just finished TIP amendment number 2, where we asked repeatedly for this information so we can incorporate it into the TIP amendment, and none was provided to us. That's where everything was changed to illustrative until this funding information could be provided and the new TIP amendment could be done.
We have it now, right? So we could start a TIP amendment.
Well,
Just kind of my concern is that there's a lot of important projects here. And some of them are, I would say all of them, except for maybe one, is in process. So, or maybe 2, but, yeah, so there's gonna be some delay there potentially while we get it to.
that's why we reached out early and often during TIP amendment 2 to try and get this information so we would minimize the delay.
Another question on that same vein. So as these issues with the STIP have to be addressed and timelines get pushed out, what does that do to projects that are already programmed on TIP?
Well, it also pushes projects out if they're waiting for funding. So for example, TIP amendment 2 was approved, or we showed a change in FY24 funding to move projects around because slips happen. Well, there is not enough time for the STIP to be approved and then to obligate that funding that we changed in FY24. Just because this ends August 5th, then FHWA has their 30-day review, which puts you into September, plus any time that's needed to adjudicate the comments that come in, which may take more than a day, I don't know. And you've already reached the end of the federal fiscal year at that point. And so that delays AMAT's projects. We're already going to be experiencing that. That'll be something I have to bring next month as a reason for why we need to do TIP amendment number 3.
So I guess I just think it's worth noting that we have a public process that happens for each of these type of amendments and, come up with a documented short-range transportation plan that is, has a measure of support from the public, but those projects now are going to be delayed because of things that don't necessarily conform. So I just think that's interesting.
Okay, well, probably ask the same question next time something like this happens, but I think I understand for today.
Okay, number 4, this is the ledger page that identifies funding for the AMATS area. So this is, our surface transportation block grant program, which has the majority of our funding, our CRP funding, carbon reduction, things like that. There are a couple of errors. One, the PL funds are shown on this page and they're not in the TIP. They should be removed. The ledger page is supposed to be a reflection of what is in the TIP. That is part of the purpose of the ledger page. And so they have stuff on there that is not in our TIP amendment number 2. FY27 is not part of the current 23 through 26 TIP, and funding amounts should be removed or shown as illustrative in this page. Although the STIP goes to 27, the TIP doesn't actually have anything programmed in it for 27. It's all illustrative. So in order to make them match up, they should match up.
This is the last time I'll stop you, but,
Oh, yeah.
and it's a general question.
Okay.
So how are we remedying these issues? Do you have a marked up page of what should, or what next thing should be shown in that? I'm just trying to think of how can we make this productive, understand what those changes need to be. And I'm not suggesting that be part of this letter, but I'm just kind of curious how I'm going to resolve these issues.
I think I note in here what should be done for each item, except for number 3. I guess I didn't put in there that those projects should be removed from the STIP until they're added to the TIP. So I guess we could add that in. But for example, for this one, for number 4, I list the PO funds are shown, they should be removed. And then the FY27 funds or portion, it should be removed or shown as illustrative. So I tried to provide what is a remedy to each item on it. Like I said, I think number 3 might be the only one that I missed out on that in the process. Okay, number 5. There are some additional errors found on the compiled STIP fiscal constraint. So there's two portions to look at for fiscal constraint. There's the ledger page that says, here's what's in your TIP funding for it and everything. Then there's the fiscal constraint that shows what are the allocation amounts. So what is the amount that everybody receives for their funding, and then what is programmed in. And so there are some errors. So I'll go through those really quickly. Again, FY24 is not part of the 23 through 26 TIP. So any FY24 programmed or FY27 funding that's programmed should be zeroed out. The sub-allocation is fine because it's saying what the sub-allocation is supposed to be, but the TIP doesn't have anything programmed, so the STIP should be zeroed out. When we do a new TIP that shows 27, it can be updated in the STIP, if that makes sense. If you need help, I'll show you what I mean.
Yeah, again, sorry.
Yes, I will go to
Kind
the
of
page.
like a knucklehead with this stuff, but
No, it's okay. So a good example. Okay, so on this page here, this is the fiscal constraint page. I hope you all can see this. I cannot. Okay. This is kind of the bad thing in the room. Sorry, anybody in the room. We have chairs that have been moved up for you to be able to see. Can you see it a little bit better there?
It's very small font.
Oh, okay. I'll try and zoom in.
number 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Keeping me in business.
Okay, sorry, it's kind of limits because of this. So, yeah, if you want to turn the lights off, that might help. So in here, it's showing each kind of funding source. So sub-allocation code. So for this example, it's the 5307 funding that goes to
Make it just a little bigger.
AMATS. Yeah, hold on.
There we go.
Okay. So it's the 5307 funding. This says fast and AMATs, this is the railroad. It's just one I selected, so I'm not saying anything about it. I just want to give an example. So it says what the sub allocation name is. It says what the sub allocation amount is. This is based on the funding information that's provided by FHWA. And then it says what's programmed to STIP IDs. So in our case, it's what's in the STIP or what's in the TIP. What did we program for the funding that we receive in the TIP? This column here, the program to STIP IDs, should match what we have, which you all approved in TIP amendment number 2, because that is the latest approved version of the TIP. And if they differ, that's where we have to figure out what the issue is. So what we're saying here is FY27 is shown, and of course not on this particular one, but so this is for fast, but imagine it says AMATs. FY27, there's a sub allocation of 340,000. Well, we as AMATs only go from 23 to 26 in our TIP. So 27 is not part of our fiscal constraint. So this amount right here that says program to STIP IDs should be zeroed out to reflect what is in the TIP until we do an update to or an amendment to our TIP to reflect what the actual amount is based on what the policy committee approves.
That's a follow-up question. So I think it seems like there's a relevant difference here. Sounds like, so we pass our TIP, there's funding amounts for like, we want to spend $10 million on this,
Mhm.
$5 million on that. It goes to governor to create the STIP. The governor could hypothetically decide to allocate less to projects or more money. Right? I mean, sort of,
Yeah.
it's his money in some ways, right? And then it comes back to us. And there might be, I guess, how do we navigate when there's a difference between what AMATS wants to fund a project for versus what the governor wants to fund a project for?
Well, when it comes to sub allocations, AMATS decides how much goes towards what, and that's what our TIP does. And so part of the negotiation about projects happens on the policy committee or technical advisory committee first, then the policy committee. If the TIP goes to DOT or the governor's designee to approve it, and they're like, we want to change what you show here in the TIP, they can't. It specifically says in federal regulations that the TIP and TIP amendments go to them and they approve it without change. They can decide not to approve it, obviously, but they cannot make changes to the TIP. That is the responsibility of the MPOs to do. As long as the MPOs fiscally constrained, followed the process, all kind of the basic things. If the MPOs, we want to program $10 billion to a project. Obviously, you're not fiscal constrained at that point, so then there'd be we got to fix that. But if it's within, the allocation that was shown here, that's fine.
So the options for the governor in the STIP in relation to the TIP are either approve what we decided or go to zero for that item.
It's more of approve the TIP or don't approve the TIP.
Okay.
And then it gets into you need to figure it out between the groups of how you want to resolve that difference. That's above my level.
So I'm gonna give you and I think I know, and I hope it's not too basic here, but I'm gonna give you a scenario. Say that like Glenn Artillery or something like that is in there in the STIP. Or the project requires, say, a phase 3 in 27. We know it's gonna cost that. I guess in the TIP, it would be represented as beyond the TIP years. And then, okay.
Yeah, and the problem is if there's no funding in the TIP years, so say you put the project in and there's nothing for 23 through 26, we can't actually put the project in the TIP because there's nothing in our fiscal constraint. That's why we had to remove a number of projects as part of Amendment 2, because the STIP was showing them in 27 or beyond, which is outside of our fiscal years. And we can't have projects with zero funding in the TIP. That was one of our corrective actions.
Thank you.
Yeah. I hope that helped. I know these are kind of very minutia things, but they're pretty important for what we do as AMATs to make sure that we're all in sync with fiscal constraint.
Aaron, does Graham have the governing documents for AMAPs?
I didn't send him
I
any,
think that might be.
the operating agreement.
Yeah.
I'll go ahead and send it. Yeah, sorry. Our normal welcome package has been delayed a little just because of other stuff, but thank you for the reminder. I'll send that out to you.
Thank you.
Okay, So next bullet is PL funds are shown in the table and should be removed again. Similar to what we've kind of already talked about. Next, 5307, this is the railroad funding in the AMATS area for 24 through 24, 25, and 26. The programmed amounts do not match up with the ledger page nor the TIP amendment number 2. So it's a pretty easy fix there. I made sure to put in there whether it was above or below the amounts in the TIP. So they're basically saying more funding is programmed than what we actually show in the TIP. And that's fine. That happens because the sub allocation might have been different because it was based on an estimate. We just haven't gotten around to updating our TIP yet to reflect what the new numbers are. And we'll have to do that as part of an amendment or whatever the threshold means. Next for 5337, state of good repair. It is also for 25 and 26. The programmed amounts don't match up with the ledger page nor the TIP amendment. The amounts are above what's programmed in the TIP. Next item, the CMAX Flex sub-allocation amount. So we were told the specific amount of CMAC funding available and program projects based on it. Well, it looks like the sub-allocation has increased based on what is in the STIP. I did not receive any notification of that. So we don't have the CMAC funding fully programmed out. There's a small little bit of a difference. So in this item, I'm just asking, can somebody please confirm what the sub-allocation amount is supposed to be for AMATs? So we can bring that forward in a future TIP amendment to fully program those funds. So we don't leave anything on the table. The NHPP funding. So those are the projects that go to the National Highway Performance Program. The NHS, National Highway System Project. So a lot of those projects that we list above, they're funded. The ledger page nor TIP Amendment 2 does not match with the fiscal constraint page. So just kind of calling out that, you know, projects are shown without it being in the TIP and also the ledger page. Next, the Surface Transportation Block Grant Program for population 200K for AMATs for FY 24 and 26 does not match up with the ledger page nor TIP Amendment number 2. So they just need to correct 24 and 25 to match the other portions of the document. Pretty easy fix. AMAT's Transportation Alternative, same thing. 24 and 25 doesn't match up with the ledger page nor the TIP Amendment number 2. And then another one is the Carbon Reduction Program for the population 200 greater for AMATs is missing. It might be the one that just says carbon reduction populations 200,000 or greater. It just doesn't have the AMATs moniker next to it. So just giving them a notice, hey, is this, what's going on with this one? Any questions on those before I move on?
I'm happy to be the idiot for a while.
Yeah. You just have a question?
No, not right now.
Are you sure?
Okay, so next one. Bear with me, this is gonna take a minute. Why all those other ones mattered is because it affects fiscal constraint, all those bullets. What are the actual sub-allocation amounts supposed to be? What is programmed in the TIP? It all really needs to match up to make sure that fiscal constraint is able to be shown for the STIP. So that's why all those bullets above were important. Number 6. Okay, advanced construct. I put advanced construction, but it should be, I believe, advanced construct. For projects is being shown as part of STIP Amendment number 1 without an equivalent amount of advanced construct conversion being shown to cover the AC. Okay, so advanced construct briefly is an funding tool that is used nationwide and supported by FHWA to allow state DOTs to advance projects ahead of schedule. So say you're moving along with the project and you're like, you know what, we're really ready to go with this project and get it moving forward a year earlier than normal. Well, great. You can use AC as a tool to borrow money from future years to pay for that advanced construct. To be like, great, we can get this out the door now. It'll be cheaper and faster. Let's do it. Useful tool as long as it's used wisely. Then the second, can you go over there and grab the mouse and clear those things out? Yep, thanks. The second portion is the ACC, Advanced Construct Conversion. That is an opportunity, or that is what is, go ahead and stay on number 6. Thank you. that is the kind of flip side of ACC. So AC is where you borrow from future years. ACC is where you basically pay it back, in all intents and purposes. Why it's really important that you need to show an equivalent amount of ACC for AC is when you borrow from future years, you don't have that money available to use in addition. So for example, if you're borrowing $140 million from FY25 to use in FY24, when you get to 25, that $140 million is already accounted for. You don't get suddenly another $140 million on top of what you've already used for AC. So it's important for you to be able to show, okay, we've got some money from the future years to advance these projects. It's in everybody's fiscal interest to do it, but you still need to account for when you're going to put that against your ledger. You're basically saying, what are, pluses and minuses? A couple other things to remember about AC is when you do the advanced construct, you're not actually using federal money. You're using non-federal money. So more than likely state money or others, whatever need be. To front the money, very similar to what happens on all other projects, then you get reimbursed when the ACC happens. That's a risk. Because if something happens between when you AC and ACC, because a long period of time has happened or number of years, it could come in that, oh, well, this is not actually eligible for federal funding anymore. Something happens, I don't know, it's whatever. It may not be reimbursed by the federal government. Or something else happens and the funding is not available because you used it up on everything else. And so you're not able to convert it and pay back the funding that you've used. Before I continue, are there questions on that? I know it's a lot, so sorry if I didn't explain it well.
Just real quick.
Oh, please.
So if you budget for 280 million, I'm using this project number 34164, and you AC forward and you only use 270, then what happens? I mean, because you're basically granted the $280 million in the tip and from feds. You just goes back to them, or do you find another place for that money in the tip?
My understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, DOT, because my understanding is you have a certain amount that you use up to, and you can say, okay, we would like 280, but we only ended up using 270. Well, you can only ask for the 270. You have to, so like the AC amount is kind of your threshold that you can go up to. You don't really lose anything because then that money will go back and be like, okay, we didn't use it, that's fine, it'll be available in the year,
Future years.
so you don't really lose anything.
Thank you.
Yeah, if I may.
Please.
I guess I'm curious if the tip is only going until what, 2026?
Mhm.
Does that mean, how do we do an ACC? Do we do ACCs only? Or we program that out for
Typically, you would show it in the outer years, even if it's not part of your fiscal constraint. You would show that there's an ACC or the conversion in FY27 or beyond. In our case, it's FY20 beyond FY27, whatever we say in the tip. So there'd be like a little code in there that says ACC, and we put how much it is. So it's recognized that there's a conversion happening, because you have to realize that AC itself doesn't count against your fiscal constraint because it's using non-federal money. ACC does count against your fiscal constraint because you're asking for the federal money at that time. And so by showing it, you're making it clear to people that at some point, even though it's outside the fiscal years, you're going to ask for that money from the feds and pay it back, or get it reimbursed.
Okay.
I think it's actually a requirement. I have the information from DOT popped up about it, and in there they talk about it's important to be able to show the ACC to make sure that you're demonstrating fiscal constraint. They had a little white paper that was drafted years ago about the purpose, need, and benefit of advanced construct. Because the other thing to remember about advanced construct, at least in Alaska, it's a requirement that the legislature approves the AC because you're using state money towards an appropriation. So is that in the capital budget to support what is shown? I don't know if there's a requirement to do like out years. So if you're in 27 or 26, when we're not there yet, I don't think there's a requirement to have to show the capital budget because it doesn't exist. But if you're like in 25, say, for example, you're coming up and 25 shows $140 million for a project of AC, I hope there's an appropriation in the capital budget to reflect that. Or they have old money that they're using to cover. Okay, so I put these two in here just to help with relevance of why this matters for AIM. I'll get to the relevance in a minute. So the first item under here, the Seward Highway Milepost 98.5 has two ACs shown in the TIP years, 25 and 27 for 280 million total, but they only show 5 million in ACC on the project pages. So when is the conversion going to be happening? How are you demonstrating fiscal constraint? There are no ACCs at all in these fiscal constraint documents. The separate one, I said there's like multiple documents. I'm talking project pages and fiscal constraint. Secondly, when you add up the AC amounts for 24 through 27 outlined in the fiscal constraint document, without the associated ACCs being shown, there's about $900 million shown in AC for those years, without any payback shown or reimbursement request shown. The STIP narrative also shows that the current balance for the state for AC is 451 million with no conversion shown in the fiscal constraint document. So if you add it all up, there's over $1 billion that could be on the books by the end of FY27. That's a lot of money. I know people say fiscal AC is a common practice. It's a lot. And why this matters for AMATs is because if you get out years where the ACC happens and the state doesn't have the money in their normal allocations to cover it, there are other allocations that they can start reaching into to help pay for that. And AMATs is one of those allocations. The federal regulations don't specifically say AMATs as an MPO must receive these allocations, just that it has to be spent within the AMATs boundary, 200,000 or greater. Similar with FAST and MVP. So this is a lot of money. And it also severely limits the flexibility for future projects to add new projects, that kind of stuff. So I just want to make sure everybody's aware of it, because I'm hoping to be around for a while, and I would really hate for this to come back in 5 years and be like, hey, AMATs, you don't get an allocation anymore because we need that money to pay the ACCs. Or to cover our ACCs, sorry, not pay. So just wanted to bring it to everyone's attention. Okay, next item, number 7, this pretty basic one, but I wanted to just call it out. When you go to provide a comment on the STIP website and you use the filter, it wasn't working to filter Anchorage and Matsu regions out. You were getting basically every project. Just as a heads up, I do have an edit for this one because I think DOT saw this and corrected the web page, but there are still some errors. So I wanted to bring forward an edit to that one to help. Number 8, there are a number of tier 2 corrective actions that need to be addressed as part of this STIP amendment. There was no information provided as of the time I put this letter together on how those tier 2 corrective actions were being addressed. I did provide you the response from FHWA to AMATs about how our corrective actions have been addressed. I just haven't seen anything from for the states. Well, I did see a letter that DOT sent to FHWA saying how they felt all the corrective actions have been addressed, but I don't find that on the website anywhere. And number 9, there's no summary of changes provided as part of the STIP amendment. Providing a memo would help. For example, I'm not sure if most people realize, but there are 36 new projects being added as part of this STIP amendment. That's a lot of new projects. The STIP amendment was the STIP was fiscally constrained when it was approved back in March. So where's the funding coming for all those new projects? And what's being removed?
Sorry, do you mean the TIP was approved in March?
The STIP, the original STIP was approved in March by a partial approval. I apologize.
I feel like somebody told me that each page has a summary of changes on it, but I'm not certain.
No, when you actually look at, well, at least not in the projects section when you want to look at it, there's nothing on here that notes what is like a previous amount? What is a new amount? So it takes some digging to go through to find what's new. And I'm just noting a memo of changes would be helpful.
But there's no harm in that comment. So,
Yeah, we do it as part of AMAT. It's a pretty standard practice to just say, okay, here's what's changing. This project's being added, this project's being deleted, this funding's increasing or decreasing. It would be really helpful just so we know, did we miss anything in our comments?
Sure.
Okay, so I did have some late on the table edits before you. I apologize for the last minute edits. Like I said, there was not a whole lot of time for staff to review. So the first is an actual edit to one we've already provided in our memo, which is number 7. So it looks like the website has been corrected to filter when you look at the Anchorage-Matsu region. So it does filter out projects. However, last I checked, there are projects still missing. So it's not giving you a complete picture of all the projects in the Anchorage and Matsu area. And I list all the projects that are not showing up compared to what I've seen elsewhere. So I was hoping to provide this to DOT so they could be like, oh, what's going on? Why isn't this showing up in the Anchorage one?
They don't
And it-
show up in the tip, but your point is the filters. That's there.
Yeah, they show up in the STIP document itself. It's just when you're going to make a comment on the STIP page and you want to filter out to be like, I would like to comment on the Glen Highway incident management and traffic accommodations to show my support for this project.
Yeah.
It doesn't appear if you filter out to the Anchorage Matsu projects only to try and reduce the number to look at.
Yeah.
It's just a minor little thing. I just wanted to give them a heads up. Okay, then we have a couple of additions. So the first, there's some additional errors in the funding categories. I apologize, I forgot to put where this is. This is in the fiscal constraint table, the fiscal constraint document. Sorry. So first is the 5307 MOA Transit FY24 sub-allocation should be 6.922708 based on the signed split letter between the municipality of Anchorage and the Alaska Railroad. So a set amount of funding comes and then the railroad and the municipality of Anchorage Public Transportation Department get together and say, okay, how much is each organization going to get? The STIP should be reflecting that STIP letter or that split letter. And then FY25 and 26 are estimates and should be based on the FY24 amounts. 5307 MOA Transit, 24, 25, and 26. The amounts that's listed in the program column should be the number that's listed there as based on the AMAT's TIP amendment number 2. I recognize that is below the sub allocation, but we have to go with what's in TIP amendment 2, and we will come back and correct it at a later date. It's on the list. 5339 transit, again, transit funding FY24 and 25. Programmed amount should be 576 to reflect TIP amendment number 2. And then for the 5339 and 5310, it's listed as AMAT's transit funding. It should actually be MOA transit funding. MOA is a direct recipient for this funding. It does not go to AMAT's. While we program these projects in the TIP, AMAT's is working with our partners in supporting them in their efforts. But this does go directly to MOA and we're asking it to be reflected as such. And it's very similar to the other funding. 5307 is shown as MOA funding or transit funding. So just keeping everything consistent. Okay, can you go ahead and switch to this? Yeah. Next one, our last comment from me. The project cost amounts in the project description pages don't add up for all projects. So I want to use this project as it is the most clear example. Just gonna zoom in. Okay. Okay, Seward Highway milepost 98.5 to 118, Bird Flats to Rabbit Creek. Okay. So this additional project detail here, when you actually start adding up the amounts in each column, they don't necessarily reflect the totals. So this first column here, when you add up the totals, it's actually 1.43 billion. instead of 1.49. So just making them aware of it. This column, you can pretty clearly see that when you add up 2, 4, 6, 9, 10, so you're at over $1 billion for this one. So just letting them know that the numbers don't add up. Why this matters for AMATs is because it helps us to determine fiscal constraint on our end. It's pretty important for everybody to know the true cost of a project. I do want to give you a heads up that this project was originally shown at $694 million when the 2050 MTP was done. It is now $1.5 billion, pretty sizable increase. There is a portion of this project that is in the AMATS boundary, and we show that in the 2050 MTP. It's about 13% of the project based on the termini. And so AMATS staff and approval by the policy committee show $90 million for this portion of the project. With this increase, if you take 13% of 1.5 billion, that cost goes from 90 million to $194 million. So I bring this up because that's a pretty significant cost change on a project. That would be something that we would have to do an amendment to the MTP for, because the MTP is currently fiscally constrained. There's not $104 million sitting around for a new project to be added. So we will have to bring that information to the committees and get DOT to help select which projects will be delayed in the MTP to cover this cost estimate, if this cost estimate is what they want shown in there. And it should be done before the TIP is amended to add this project in. Because part of what the TIP relies on is the MTP to be fiscally constrained. So the TIP then has its ability to be fiscally constrained and also meet our air quality requirements. So.
I don't know how relevant it is, but I don't think the first two construction projects they'll be outside of AMAT's boundaries.
It doesn't matter because the entire project is part of the environmental document. So any portion that falls within the AMAT's boundary, we have to account for. Although we only show the cost estimate, that's the portion within our boundary. We used it based on the overall cost estimate. And since the overall cost estimate has gone up, we have to adjust the amount that's shown within our boundary. So, yeah, I do want to let you know the comments that were brought before you today are not a fully exhaustive list of all issues with this STIP amendment number 1. These were just the ones that I felt relevant to AMATs at the time. There are other issues that have been brought up by the other MPOs, FAST and MVP. So I really wanted to focus on, I think, what was important based on previous discussions from the committee members. But I encourage you to take a look at the STIP if you have other areas that you would like to look at.
I think it's because you use that for an example, I think it's important to point out that, I mean, I look at it as more of a program than a project, that sewer highway work. And I can't remember the schedule. That total build out is probably closer to 20 years. You know, so and you can see that most of that money is showing up outside of the time period of the STIP, so after 27. But I just think it's important to point that out. So
yeah,
so people listening don't think that we're going to spend $1.6 billion in the next 3 years.
Yeah.
That's the end.
That's all I had.
So clarify, the action is to approve forwarding this letter on to the commissioner with these edits. Do we have any commission or questions from the committee?
Sure, a couple questions.
Please.
Number one, could we just say the Anchorage Assembly, so this can go to all the members? And then number two, do we need a motion for staff to send this on their own behalf?
It's actually
coming from you, Aaron, or is it the intention for it to come from the policy committee?
Yeah, I wrote it in a way to be like, these were approved by the policy committee to send to DOT. Historically, the directors send the letters themselves, especially Sean is our chair. It's a little odd for Sean to be sending his own letter. So to keep it at like a neutral level, it comes from the staff. but it has to be approved. So in there, we say the AMATS Policy Committee approved these comments. We can say something else to make it more clear. The AMATS Policy Committee is sending you these comments or whatever you want, if that is what you would like.
Yeah, I guess, my interest would be in, because I want these things to potentially be addressed. So, insofar as they need to be addressed. So I'd like this letter to go to the recipients regardless of whether it's approved by the policy committee. So having to make the motion and see if there's the will of this body to do that. I think this should be sent regardless. If there's a way that you can modify the descriptor on.
Oh, you mean send it regardless of the vote of the committee? I won't send it unless the committee approves it.
So I get, okay, help me understand then, what is the purview of our, you acting in your role as the AMATS executive director. Working for the municipality to correspond with state entities.
My role is to bring these to you all to see if you want to send something. Because this is such a hot topic, I don't think it's appropriate for me as staff to be sending my comments without the policy committee saying, we want to take these as our own, or we're okay with you sending your comments. So I guess if you all vote and be like, we don't want to send it as the PC, but you as staff, we give you approval to go ahead and send these out as you as staff. I think it's important to come from the PC itself, because I think that's a lot more backing than staff sending it.
Okay, understood, thank you.
If I.
Yeah.
I guess I'm curious. I mean, a lot of these feel like pretty direct questions to DOT. I wonder kind of what timeline we're looking at if we send this formally versus what our alternatives are in terms of getting maybe more incremental rapid feedback. Are there options for getting answers more quickly?
Well, I think we informally has the letter already. So I'm sure that we're working on resolving some of these things. So that optimistically, that's in process.
Yeah. Or I guess I was also thinking like, is it appropriate today to start to get some answers to this, or do we want to just send this and get answers back at our next meeting?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I feel like there should be, and I hope that our planners and Aaron will get together and kind of sort these things out. Is the question when it comes back to the policy committee to see the resolution?
Sure, yeah, I guess I'm sort of just curious on like what the timeline looks like. Because I guess one possibility, it seems to me, is like we send this letter and then there's this August deadline for public comments, and then it sounds like it's going to the Federal Highway Administration pretty quickly after that. So I just like want to give DOT staff a chance to respond and reply, maybe for us to hear again from them, but perhaps that's not the appropriate process.
James, do you have something to add there?
Yeah, if I could, James Starzik, I'm the AMAX coordinator for DOT. Yeah, generally, when we have a STIP comment period, STIP project team collects all of these comments and then replies to them in a response summary that becomes a part of the STIP submission document. So they wait until they get all of the public comments and then respond to them within that. Parallel to that, we could work with the STIP team to provide a more a quicker response directly to the MPOs. Generally haven't done that in the past, but I think it's, if you're sending a letter to DOT, it would seem reasonable to be able to respond to that. But in this context, this isn't necessarily just a general letter to the DOT. It is a part of the public comment process on the STIP document, which would then be resolved in the comment response document that goes along with STIP. So that's generally how it works. But it's all, we can always take it up with leadership to see if we can provide a more expedited response.
I guess to clarify for me at least, so that the policy board decides to forward these comments on, is that considered with all the other public comments, or does it have any higher level?
No,
Okay, so it's just
considered
considered a public.
considered as part of just public comments. Any agency comment. But like I said, you know, there's always opportunity to improve or to go beyond what is the basic requirement of responding to public comments. There's no reason we couldn't.
Does that help?
Yeah, I guess what I'm happy, I don't have a specific solution in mind here and don't want to create a new process, but what I have in mind here is being fair to DOT and hearing the response, and there's a lot of comments here, so I'd be eager to hear back and also then have a chance to, there's a lot here, so also then having a chance to potentially reply to the response potentially might be appropriate in this context, but again, I don't want to create a bunch of work for folks and create a brand new process. I don't know if that feels appropriate to the other members, but trying to balance having some maybe back and forth on this with giving DOT a fair chance to respond. Also don't want to overcomplicate it.
I feel like informally we could work towards that. Respond to those comments as soon as possible, as soon as practical.
Well, I would also add, you know, that as a member of this policy board, DOT has this forum at any given time to open this discussion, respond to anything. So it doesn't necessarily, you know, we don't necessarily need to go outside of what we have here. You know, Sean is regional director, so pretty well connected with the thoughts of the commissioner. There's always, you know, through our membership in AMATs, there's always a conduit for continuing open discussion on any item.
That help?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I guess then the question is like, maybe I think, Sean, are there pieces of this that you have issue with, or you wanna respond to or correct before we send it?
No, I mean, I think all those comments have value, and I'm not close enough to the STIP to know how valid or not they are, so, but I mean, I think any input is good, so. So I'm gonna support board. Are there any other comments or questions from the committee?
Just have one for Aaron. I mean, this is pretty extensive list. Does this happen every year? That's one part of my question. And the second question is this all of it? Are we gonna be revisiting this again?
With this amendment or forever?
Or no, for what we're doing with this amendment?
Probably not, I'll be honest,
Okay.
because the comment period's gonna end.
Right.
They're gonna adjudicate the comments, they're gonna forward that, whatever that is, that document is adjudicated to FHWA, FTA for approval. And then they're done, and then they'll move on to the next one. And is this common? No. I personally, until this STIP cycle, I have never written a letter like this on the STIP. And I don't know if the previous director had ever written a letter like this on the STIP, or the policy committee forwarded a letter like this. I'm sure there's been comments on it before, but not to this scale that I know of.
That, I mean, that process is gonna continue, right? So as soon as, I think we should start on this tip amendment number 3 right away, so that we can, because I assume that they're gonna have to be captured, whatever we put in the tip is gonna have to be captured by another amendment in the STIP. And, so it's a very cumbersome process. Please.
Yeah, I want to thank Aaron for putting this letter together and for doing this level of analysis. I think it's really important to have these comments as part of our public record. You know, it's not necessarily just about one entity commenting on another entity's work. It's about, you know, at the end of this process, Anchorage residents, Alaska residents have to be, you know, it's about considering their best interest and making sure that that there aren't errors with the documents or that everything is in compliance, and that benefits the people that we're all serving. Right? You know, as I think sort of, preaching to the choir, in the choir, and I don't know what the right phrase is, but, we can all, policy committee members, be picking up the stuff too. Should be doing a deep dive on the STIP, on the 10. I think that just goes to show, we're relying on the expertise of our AMAT staff, and I'm really grateful for what Aaron has put together. But these are also things that, if we identify concerns, I would hope that policy committee members are bringing that stuff too. So I guess, yeah, those are my thoughts.
Yep. Any other comments, questions from the committee? Not seeing any, so I'm going to open it up to any comments or questions from the public. Seeing any in the room, nothing online.
Nothing online.
What is the will of the committee?
So motion to approve AMATs to send this letter on to the commissioner. Is that the motion that you prefer?
With that is.
If you would like the edits, yeah.
Edits incorporated.
The edits outlined.
With those-
Yeah.
Second.
Second.
Second. Third. I'll give the second to Mr. Lipfield. Moved by Dr. Boland. Any further discussion? No. Are there any objections to approving the motion? That's to send AMAT's staff comments as amended to the Commissioner for Incorporation into the STIP. No objections. The motion is approved. Do you have any other items at all? There's no other action items or any other presentations or anything?
No, there are no other presentations.
All right, well, that brings us down to committee comments. Does anybody on the committee have any comments that they'd like to add?
I believe Jason does. Jason has his hand raised.
Yeah.
Yeah, Doug.
I just real quickly, I know we're wrapping up. I've got to run to the airport, but I want to make sure that I made this vote. So thank you, everybody. Were you able to hear me there?
Yeah, thanks, Jason.
Thank you.
Are there any public comments? Any comments from the public? I'm not seeing any.
I have.
Oh,
Sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, I just wanted to note, AMATS is down to 2 staff members, Christine and myself, plus assistance from the amazing people to my left here, which I really appreciate. We couldn't do it without them, from Mook and Lori, along with others. But we do have positions open if anybody is interested in an AMATS position. So those are online, and I encourage everybody to apply. Thank you.
how many vacancies do you have?
3.
There's 3. Okay.
And as a note, I'll be looking to add another position for a GIS person. We have a lot of GIS needs because we produce a lot of data in AMATS that I feel we need to get some better handle on being able to provide maps and analyses and everything to use the policy committee for everything that we produce. So I'm looking at adding that in as quick as I can.
Thanks, Aaron.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments? Please, back to the committee. Dr. Wall.
Oh, sure. Thanks. So I think, I hear the desire to create another amendment to the TIP, perhaps to, make the STIP square, but I guess the exhortation I want to give, I think part of the important function and role of an MPO is to make sure that there is a measure of local control when it comes to our transportation decisions, infrastructure, land use, all of that can be taken together. And so I've said before, and I just want to kind of state again that when we amend the TIP, I don't want to do so in a way just to make the state's priorities go, at the potential expense of deprioritizing local priorities. So just want us all to be able to take a critical eye when it comes to that process and make sure that the tip is leading. And I think that's kind of what we're missing here. Some of the things that we addressed through this letter is that tip. These municipalities, AMAPs, I should say the MPOs, short range transportation plan, that has to be the leading document. In those priorities that we get, those comments that we get from the public, I think those really have to come to the fore. Make decisions to add or delete or right size projects. So that's just my 2 cents. Thanks.
We're in agreement there. You know, I think tip amendment number 2 pulled out all the projects that were on the NHS. I think, yeah, there's a lot of important projects for not only the community of Anchorage, but also for the statewide transportation system. And I think if you look at that list, there's some help for the Eagle River residents, which I feel kind of maybe are a little bit misrepresented in AMAX. So anyway, I think it's a list of good projects there for both the community and the state. But we encourage people to have input to this amendment number 1. My opinion is not that important, you know, it's one guy, but yeah, we need to hear that from the public. So. All right, any more comments? I think maybe we can end it on that. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. Seconded. Yeah, seconded moved by Dr. Boland, seconded by Mr. Littlefield. Any objections? Hearing none, we're adjourned at 2:12 p.m.
Thank you.
I should have been calling you Mr. Hall.
Yes. I was taking offense.